And I'd begin in looking at this international landscape by describing what President Obama's inbox must look like every day. I mean, think about President Obama. He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he comes downstairs from the White House every day and walks through the Rose Garden into the side door of the West Wing, which was built by Theodore Roosevelt in 1908, 1909, and he faces his desk, and there's two inboxes. And the first inbox is a mile high of problems called domestic policy, and I'm not competent to talk to you about domestic policy. I have views but no expertise, so I won't inflict my views on you this evening. But I know something about the other inbox because I was a career diplomat for a very long time. And that inbox, that foreign policy inbox, is also a mile high. What's in it? I would say the most complex international agenda that the United States has ever faced. Now, I don't want to exaggerate. I'm not saying it's the most fateful time for America, because that would have been the Revolution against the British in the late 18th century. And I wouldn't even say it's the most dangerous time, because that was the Civil War, when our greatest president from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, saved the Union against the Southern Rebellion. And ironically, given the complexity of America's role in the world today, it's not even the time of our most intensive involvement with the rest of the world. You'd have to say 1941-45, when we had more than 12 million men and women in uniform stationed all around the world. That was the time when America was most intensively involved. But I do think it's the most complex time that Americans have ever faced internationally. And I frankly, looking back on the course of my career over the last couple of decades, don't remember a time quite like this when we have so many vital challenges facing us simultaneously. So I start with a lot of sympathy for our president. First of all, I think he's an outstanding person, and I support him. I think he's been a very good president in all ways, but I feel sorry for him because he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. The Great Recession. The economists will tell us it's over. Is it over when we have 8.3% unemployment and millions of people who've lost their homes to foreclosure, and young kids, especially even our young college graduates, finding it really difficult, to find a place in the world? So the president has that, and it's got domestic and international implications. He inherited the two wars, and I think rightly took us out of Iraq in December of last year, just a couple of months ago. But he's had to build up in Afghanistan. We've faced some real troubles in Afghanistan, and the representatives of NATO here who have been out there know how difficult it is. No conventional victory in sight, but we don't want the Taliban to regain any advantage, and we know we have to stay for several more years to try to stabilize that very poor and very divided country. If you start your day or your presidency with the most serious recession since the 1930s and two major land wars, and we've never fought two major land wars simultaneously in the history of our country, with the sole exception of the two-front war in the Second World War, that is a prodigious and daunting and compelling agenda. But that's not the full agenda in that inbox, because behind the recession and the two wars are the two countries, Iran in the Middle East and North Korea in Asia, seeking a nuclear weapons capability in the case of Iran, has already obtained nuclear weapons in the case of North Korea, and both countries represent a real threat to peace, to stability, and to the balance of power which is in our favor in the two most critical parts of the world, the Middle East and Asia. And think of the rest of that inbox. The fact that our strongest partner in the world, the European Union, the European members of NATO, have been in economic crisis, a near economic meltdown, which is hopefully going to be avoided, of the Eurozone, an existential political crisis in some ways in Europe about the future of the European Union itself. And that's our closest partner in the world, and we have symbiotic economic ties with that part of the world. And beyond that, the Arab revolutions of the last 15 months, the most important event, the most transformative event in the Arab world, probably since the collapse of the four empires at the end of the First World War, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire that created the modern Middle East. It's that consequential. And I haven't even gotten, by the way, to the heart of that inbox. Because the heart of the inbox, it's the same inbox that President Bush faced as well, and President Clinton before him, they're the transnational challenges that globalization has produced. Now, there's a bright side of globalization, and we can talk about that, but there's also a dark side. And think about these problems that are going under our borders and over our borders and right through our borders. 18th and 19th century Americans could choose to be engaged in the world or not because we had these two great oceans and we had this great continent, and Chicago's right in the middle of it. But we now live in a globalized, highly integrated world, and we can't escape the world's problems. So the heart of the inbox, climate change. And we can't deny it, and we can't deny the science. It's happening, and we are laggards. We're the largest carbon emitter in the world, and India and China are right behind us. And none of the three of us are leading, but the Europeans are. And so we have no solution available unless we find the leadership to transform our economy and make really difficult decisions about industry and environmental standards. Climate change is there. And trafficking of women and children, which is a scourge on every continent in the world. And international crime cartels, international drug cartels, the threat of pandemics, the threat of global food shortages. This is what the president faces every day. The nexus of terrorism in WMD, think about that for a minute. We were attacked on 9/11, and all of us remember exactly where we were and what we were thinking and how horrible it was. But in a way, if you reflect on the tactics of Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, they used the most crude means available to attack the symbol of our economic power, Wall Street, the symbol in reality of our military power, the Pentagon. We don't know where Flight 93 was headed for sure, but likely the White House or the Capitol building. And they used the most crude means, they used conventional means. They flew airplanes into buildings, and the resulting crash and explosion and fire and falling buildings killed 3,000 Americans and citizens from many other countries. What if al-Qaeda had used nuclear suitcase bomb technology on 9/11? Or chemical weapons, or biological weapons? They would have killed multiples of 3,000 people, but that is the threat that all of our NATO partners, all countries around the world, and our country face every day. Because there are terrorist groups, American terrorist groups, and foreign terrorist groups. If they could get their hands on nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, they'd use them. And the president just spent 3 days in Seoul at the Nuclear Security Summit focused on this issue. How do we keep the most powerful weapons out of the hands of the worst people in the world? Vile, evil, nihilistic terrorist groups. And we've seen what they're like and what they're capable of doing. This is a tough inbox. It's a tough set of problems for the United States. And I think we have a president who's responded extraordinarily well and effectively to it. That's my personal view. But boy, I don't relish the fact that our country has to be the world leader, still the only superpower in the world, and face this array of problems every day.